the issue of a concessional loans that we are actually giving much premium to that is not really happening because of the conditions. We can talk about the redemption to refinance itself, the government, where we know when the government it really goes back to the market to get new debt to cover those that have matured. Could you talk about the redemption, a bit of it, maybe as your closing remarks before you go?
I think most corporate organizations, when you find yourself in a sticky place, you go back to the market and you reschedule your debt.
Yes.
It is something that you put in your total cost of operations and saying, we're going to spend so much to refinance our debt, to restructure our debt, but then if we restructure it, these are the outcomes that are going to mean that within about 2 or 3 years and all the rest of it, we are back to the schedule where we want to be, right? So there's got to be a complete, transparent restructuring memo that says this is why we want to do it and so forth. If that is brought out and given to these experts we have here to scrutinize and basically challenge, you come out with a memo that works, a restructuring program that works, right? And then you hold people accountable because the deliverables are very clear and the route to those deliverables are also clear. If you're restructuring your debt, you're restructuring it to achieve what? Right? Okay, you want to lower your payment, right? And so forth, so that you keep your ceiling right. But are you basically then restructuring internally your cost of government, for example? All these costs that we have as a country, are those also being restructured in sympathy to meeting the repayments and making the economy productive again? So there's a whole host of questions that you have to put together when you talk about going to restructure the debt of the country. It's not just going for restructure it and say, right, we restructured it, now we can continue spending again the way we used to spend. That is a hard fact that you have to work on as the economic guys in the country.
Right. Patrick, and I know I have to let you go just briefly, Rachel. I'll come to you. Thank you so much. But also, when we'll be discussing about revenue collection, there's this interesting also headline that was on the Business Daily. KRA to hire 1,000 spies in war against tax cheats. All right? Soon we'll be having espionage.
Taxation.
Yeah, Patrick, if I just want. This is where you're pushing KRA. Just a moment. Let him just finish it before you go.
I wanted to give you a backstory.
Let Patrick just finish, and then we'll let you. Yeah.
If those people are being hired on the basis they're going to be paid on a return, I'm happy, right? But if they're being hired and said, now go out and do it, and I'm paying you already, I wouldn't. If I'm starting an organization, I hire people on results. I tell you, go and look for me for advertising, right? And I'll pay you 10% of the income I get on advertising, right? So if these guys are going to go out and look for tax, whatever it is, and so forth, you go and get it, bring me back those whatever it is, I'll give you the authority to do it. But I will pay you on actually getting, getting additional tax. So these guys who are cheating, so long as you can get me that back, then I pay you a percentage of what you're giving me, right? Let's not pay them up front and tell them you got a good job. I'll just go back and put my feet up and say I'm a sleuth. Yeah, give me the data, then I'll go and tell you what is happening.
Yeah.
We have to make it different, think differently.
Thank you, Patrick. Patrick has to
Now,
go. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as always, Thursdays should be declared, a board's meeting international day.
It is. That's why you find quite a few of us normally don't come on a Thursday. But I always try and make it a opportunity.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Can I come to Rachel before I come to you? Right, Wagasha, please. Rachel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
just
just wanted to
thought.
clarify.
Yeah.
Okay. We talk statistics. We say 63% or 61%. The figures also have to be clear. We need to have clear data, accurate data to talk from. Now, the 63.2% clearly has placed Kenya in the top quintile, among its peers.
Yes.
So that puts us in a position, they call it a creep. I don't know what I want to call it. We are just looking at the piece we are about to drop. And, people should not joke about this. However, we also want to step back and say that we know what the government is doing. It has poured billions of money into infrastructure, including a complete railway built by the Chinese. But also that brings us to the other side where we want to ask what happened to the promises they gave you know, where they said they would put more money also to manufacturing and public housing. We haven't seen much of that, even if though the borrowing has been done. Another thing we would need to ask ourselves has to do with, you know, borrowing, you know, to pay in foreign currency.
Yes.
In other words, you are borrowing a pound to actually pay with a Kenya shilling. You come, you put together, and then you can make one pound to be able to pay the debt. That's why you find that Kenya is repaying interest. We are restructuring what Obath has just said. Are we restructuring to be able to spend as you know, as normal, or are we actually borrowing to pay our interest so that we are not defaulting? Those are issues we need to ask. Then we need also to indicate clearly that external debt is not necessarily harmful to an economy, and you have just said it, Dupa. And studies have actually indicated that you know, debt inflows, external debt inflows can grow an economy if it is well synchronized, as you have put it. Yes. But here, when we borrow, you know, why? You know, somebody has to explain to me why we are to borrow the Eurobond. Somebody has to really tell me, you know, from the principles of economics, you put me down and you tell me we are to borrow this because these parameters, our economic parameters were right. I remember when we were in the IMF, I was serving at the IMF, we said no, not once, not twice, more than 3 times. The IMF said you are not ready for a Eurobond borrowing.
Yes.
But we went ahead and borrowed. So we end up, you know, paying. We borrow so much externally until we start, you know, simply making it the repayments, the interest rate, the principal repayments, you know, that now leave the country very vulnerable. And right now, in fiscal terms, the Kenyan government, Kenyans as a country, as individuals, even as citizens, have got a huge debt on their heads, which they did not make any decisions as to how it should be acquired. Right. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Gashan, also that issue of Eurobond as well.
I think it's quite interesting the way Daktari has put it. The point I wanted to make, there's a backstory to everything that we have said around this podium, that if we do not rebuild the productive economy and we continue with the public debt that we have, in 10 or 15 years, none of you around this table will be paying taxes. And none of the productive activities that are eligible for external debt will be available to future generations to grow. So it is extremely important to underline the fact that unless we manage public finances properly and get off the cliff where we are at the moment, we are impoverishing future generations.
Completely.
The children that we expect to use the productive economy, rebuild their lives, rebuild agriculture, rebuild industry, manufacturing, will not be able to do that. And they will probably live poorer lives. Nothing that we have said says that borrowing or build-up of public debt is a bad thing. Many great economies in the world, the United States, Germany after the Second World War, many economies, Korea, all these economies grew out of nothing, but they borrowed. But the point is that the borrowing had results. It was programmed. There was a memo to grow the future, grow the productive economy. What we have failed to do is to match policy on the fiscal side with the monetary side to get a balance and get the productive economy moving. What is called the private sector, productive economy, whatever you call it.
Yes.
And you can use whatever pillars you want. You can use housing, affordable housing, you can use infrastructure, you can use health, you can use, but those pillars must be programmed with results. And when you borrow, you must get those results so that future generations can benefit.
Yes.
If they don't benefit, you're impoverishing them.
Thank you.
Let's clarify just one thing, Dipa. What was our population during this last census?
47 million?
47.
Yeah.
But
But that is a ballpark. According to a ballpark figure, according to world population, we are standing at 51.
yes, the
yeah?
figures we have, which are recorded elsewhere, is 51 million.
51 million.
And I wanted to just say something I wrote down here, implying that every Kenyan owes US dollars 962. Every child who is being born now.
Okay.
You know, there's a child being born as we are seated
How are they
here.
going to pay?
It has 962 US dollars to pay.
Translated to the Kenyan shillings.
Produces, that person when he grows up, or all of us, we only produce $1,169 a day. I mean, a year or a year actually. In comparison, in South Africa, every South African who is born produces owes 1,434 and produces US dollars 12,000. Do you see the disconnect?
Yes. Disconnect.
There's a huge disconnect on what we are doing. And well, we are not saying that South Africa is exactly like Kenya. I mean, there is some differences. They are bigger than we are. But when you look at, these figures, they simply don't make sense. So unsustainable debt is dangerous, and we have reached those dangerous levels. And we need to do something. The government needs to stop and start thinking how to turn that around before we can move forward.
I wanted to latch on the issue of the Eurobond as well, because we had the two equal tranches, one repayable in 10 years, the other one in 30 years. And the second, people were questioning also on the feasibility of it, because there was a high risk premium put on the second one because of the length of time. But they're saying the risk factor will actually have us pay more on the second tranche. Maybe we can pick your brains, Anne, you being also, you worked abroad for the longest time with the Wall Street and the Bank of America. Do you think that this was the wisest of fashion for us to really go?
I think everything started with good intent, but the outcome was not the right outcome. So as Kenya has been growing and we're seeing this debt growing, again, we become more risky to everyone who wants to lend to us. And the more risky you are in banking, then a higher interest rate is charged on you. Yeah. So, in fact, for me, when the first Eurobond was happening, I was quite excited because I thought maybe at the back end, the government was doing something to actually strengthen our currency, do things that would actually de-risk us. Yes. So that means it makes sense to actually do the Eurobond. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I'm always questioning the advisors in government, what were they actually thinking? Yeah. Right? So for me, it's always like, it looks good on paper, but the outcome is always bad. And we need to do something, because we need to actually look at it and say, why aren't we getting the outcomes we need to get? So the idea of a Eurobond is not bad. It's just that the outcome did not come out as it used to be. And I think it's just the way the spending is, because all that money that was actually borrowed with the Eurobond, where did it go to? Right? So like in Kibaki's time, money was borrowed, and there's nothing wrong with borrowing, but it has to go into things that provide production. We actually need to see a return on investment. If you actually say what's the return on investment on this debt that was borrowed, it's really hard to tell, right? And yes, so there's all about policy, there's more about implementation of things, and I think that is the problem. So around public finance management, there's nothing wrong with debt, but for right now, we are in a really bad problem. We are in debt, and we need to figure out how to reduce that debt, restructure that debt. But even when you're doing that, you have to be smart about it and the consequences of the decisions that are being made by the National Treasury. And for me, it actually scares me that the people who are in charge of National Treasury are actually in court around corruption. So the question is, who are the leaders in government in a very sensitive document? So, yeah.
All right, Stanley Manduku, maybe you can tell us more, because I hold with me, I think this is the medium-term debt management strategy 2015. Wagasha, maybe you and most of you could be privy to this as well. So how come this particular strategy and where we are, was it a strategic misalignment that now we are actually on that particular trajectory, what the National Treasury had projected and where we are right now? It seems we are actually deviating completely. Why the variance?
I think
if you go through this particular document.
One of the challenges, okay, I've not had the opportunity of going through it. Maybe Dr. will give more fact on that. But one thing we have, there's a problem we have in Kenya. everything on paper looks good.
Yes.
Everything on paper looks very good.
And I have the paper here. I'll tell you what it says. Yeah?
But the problem is that the outcome. I don't know whether it's a problem of implementation, or is a problem is that we don't believe in what we write, or is it we just totally just refuse to implement what we have been advised or what we have written. I really do not know what the problem is. Yeah.
Say what.
But I think that's something that that is a starting point.
Yes.
That is really the starting point. So that we realize that every other proposals, they are very good proposals.
Yes.
You know, like now I was just wondering, why in Kenya, like today, when you talk about creating wealth, the manufacturing, there was even the president has come up with a four-point agenda of manufacturing. Today, why are we still exporting leaves and importing tea? You just can't understand why. We're exporting berries and then importing coffee. And you look at the price differentials and what, there is really no magic.
Yeah.
But there are no systems that have been put in place to encourage. And the few investors that we had encouraged, they're now running away. They are going to Ethiopia. They are going to Kigali.
Yes.
We're just wondering, what is it that we are really not doing right? Maybe Dr. can tell us more about the paper.
Okay. let me tell you what the paper reads. And I think this is the National Treasury Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy 2015 that was prepared by the then CS of National Treasury, Henry Rotich, and Kamau Thuge. And on the latest debt sustainability analysis for Kenya indicates that Kenya's debt is sustainable. The DCA compares debt burden indicators to indicative thresholds over a 20-year projection period. Our debt burden indicator that exceeds its indicative threshold suggests a risk of experiencing some form of debt distress. In the long term, PV of the public debt to GDP is expected to be 41.3% of GDP in 2017, while the PV of the public debt to revenue remains below the threshold of 300% throughout the period of analysis. Overall, the results from the debt sustainability analysis indicate that Kenya's public debt remains sustainable over, this was in 2015, over the medium term. Then you flip over to where it says the government continues to strengthen capacity in public debt management, right? This is where we maybe also can try and latch on a bit. A new treasury structure is being set up with a recognized public debt management office, that is a PDMO, with adequate skilled staff posted to DMD, while training in debt management techniques will be scaled up. In fact, the debt recording system will be upgraded from CSDRMS 2000 plus version 1.3 to 2.0, right? You can see all the systems were working. But from 2015 up to now, this is where we have now this particular office, the Public Debt Management Office, coming into effect. Why did it take that long?
No, it was always there under Treasury.
No, but it was no. But right now is when actually Dr. Sirima is taking over this.
This document you are reading in the bar is normally an annex of the Kenya report in the IMF. It is the country report. They have to give.
Maybe the question I should be asking: why are we feeling the effect of this particular office now with Dr. Sirima? Yeah.
Now, I'm glad that the media has picked up on this idea, because it is critical and it is essential. Other countries have done it, set up public debt management offices when they were at a cliff. Ireland did it, Argentina did it when they were at a cliff, as we are in at the moment. I can confirm, and I'm happy and hope for the best, because the office that you mentioned is in the hands of a professional man. It's in the hands of a person that I respect, that I worked with in the Central Bank of Kenya, and I wish him well. The key to turn is what my colleague is saying, to turn an appointment of an efficient and professional man into results. The main burden is to taper our public debt, taper it from where it is at 63% of our GDP, and attempt to taper it down towards where we were, about 5-6 years ago. We were at about 38% at the end of the Kibaki regime. That is the main challenge. It requires restructuring of the debt, it requires that we prolong the maturities of debt, that we work to ensure that the yields do not keep rising, because as Daktari said, the shilling values that you have to pay to repay in this debt, dollar for dollar, will be increasing. And unless the economy productively is generating this income, that office will be of no use.
It will be of no use.
So we need to support the public debt management concept and taper the debt down by prolonging maturities, mixing a policy between the central bank and the fiscal side properly in accordance with the business cycle. At the moment, with all the talk about what we will do with the pillars in this and that, we should be using a tight fiscal policy. In other words, we should be consolidating our spending. And we should be strengthening the central bank to lend out more money to the private sector and to drive private sector-led growth. That is the correct policy mix today. There are times when you can mix a soft fiscal policy with a soft monetary policy and get good results, like Kibaki did. But our policy mix has been, frankly, zero.
Zero, as it is right
Yes.
now. Well, zero is not really a good mark, actually, as it is right now. Yeah, but before we wind up the show, I'll be remiss if you don't really talk about also the China debt, right? China is, of course, Kenya's largest creditor, as it is right now, holding about 72% of the country's bilateral debt as of March 2017. Also, studies show that Kenya's Chinese debt poses a threat because the loan agreements are not transparent, projects are not well prioritized,
Exactly.
accounting procedures are weak, and it's not clear what projects are costing. And I remember also, just from the notes that I prepared earlier, we had Approver Sagni, the World Bank lead economist for Kenya, Rwanda, and Ethiopia, who said that China's loans to Kenya had grown by 54% a year in the past 4 years, with some having high interest rates. And then he said, quote unquote, China's loans come with attractive interest rates and without strings attached for good governance. The loans, however, could harm Kenya in the long run because of their lack of transparency and failure to tie aid to key governance reforms. Some of China's loans are also non-concessional, which can raise debt to GDP levels quickly. And this is way back, I think, in 2016 there.
17.
This is where 2016, 2017. Can we talk about China's loan and best practices when you're talking about good governance? So it doesn't matter how we actually, governing, or even them the way they're governing. Let's go for the money.
Let's hear. Let me hear from him.
You want to hear from
From my senior, because I've talked about this. And
You talked about
yeah,
this.
I will never have a visa to China.
All right.
I've always said their debts are, their contracts are not transparent. There's too much fine print.
We've been asking for the contractual agreement for
give
the
you-
SGR.
And
To give you a
Even my colleague Mark Masai put the president on the spot about this contractual agreement. We've not received the contractual agreement until today, right? And this is where we're talking about good governance. If we're talking about the national ethos right now, even from the BBI, it should start with transparency, even from contractual agreements, as it is right now. And should we just pick a partner because he has the money, regardless of maybe human rights issues, regardless of poor, corporate governance, or just governance broadly? So it doesn't matter, your work ethos as a nation. If you have the money, we'll come for the money, but we'll just, cast a blind eye to these other critical factors, so to speak. Before we come to Wagasha, let's hear from Anne and Stanley.
I just have to say this. When I look at this China debt, I look at the two superpowers, the US and China. And of course, if you're working with the US, they want transparency, they have conditions. And so it looks like the people in our government have chosen maybe not to go in that direction, because they want to go with China, who, like I said, I don't know who's negotiating these deals, and things are not transparent. And I look at China and I say I kind of admire them in a way, because and maybe this sounds controversial, they looked at the opportunity and the potential in Africa, and they said, you know what, this is where we need to be. And they have been positioning themselves as a friend to Africa. But in this friendship, who is winning? And I see that the Chinese are winning and not the Africans. So our Kenyan government and the people they put in negotiating these deals, the people who are in Beijing talking with the Chinese government, are they really doing the work for the Kenyan citizen, or are they positioning themselves for a kickback or something? I'm very concerned because if you read about what has been happening, for example, Sri Lanka handed over a port to China.
Yeah, I
Yes.
told you this morning.
Right? That is scary because Kenya is the gateway to Africa. Kenya has strategic assets. And then we are putting ourselves in a position where a country, a foreign country, can actually come in and take over some of our national assets. That for me is a great, great concern. So for me, I always say when we are sitting down on the negotiation table with these countries, for example, China, or people in Europe, you know, European Union or the UK, we actually have to get the right people there negotiating the right deals, because we are not going to say we're going to take this money, because I think the Jubilee or the Uhuru administration was very ambitious, which is a really good thing. In fact, I was very excited, and it was a build-up to Kibaki. But all this money we've been getting from China, who's winning? Is it helping Wanjiko on the ground?
Is it
and I
helping
don't
Wanjiko?
think it is.
Good question.
It is not.
And maybe on the contractual agreements that we have with China as well, because they've been putting also a condition that, yes, if we are going to extend this particular loan to you, also you are going to take our contractors as well. So the question is, the potentiality of development, technology transfer, where is it? Because you come, you give us the advance, the loan, also you bring your contractors here, they build the standard gauge railway, the locomotives, they're the mechanics, they're the drivers, then what after that? Is there any technological or skill transfer that we're benefiting from the contractual agreement? Because China has dominated. We cannot even talk about also the deficit, the balance of trade deficit that is skewed, you know.
Favor.
Right.
I think one thing you've asked, why is it that we are going to China? We are going to China for two things. One, the ease of accessing credit. We do not want to be taken through all those conditionalities. So that's why we have decided to opt. And then secondly, the possibility or the ease of making commissions and kickbacks. Now, the issue about the contracts. Indeed, I think until very recently, initially the issues of technology transfer and the issues of local content in this particular contract were not really being given a lot of emphasis upon. But one thing I know is that we've had legislative intervention whereby within the public procurement, and we have regulations that have come in stating that at least 40%, at least for 40%, they are not wrong, of all these contracts should be done or should be given to local people, with the sole aim of one, making the locals, giving the locals an opportunity to learn from what the Chinese and the other partners are doing, and also having that aspect of technology transfer, and also to some extent giving people an opportunity maybe to do or to do some business. China as a country, it has also its own private or their own personal requirements or needs. They'll want to expand. They've got this expansionist theory. They want to be all over. Secondly, they have got a big population that requires that it has to be engaged meaningfully. That is why in the conditions that they give in these particular loans, they have to say that maybe you must employ or you must use Chinese companies and all that.
But those are
China also, they have got a very good work ethics, if I may say. These people can really work. They really work, and then they can do their own stuff the best way. But now the question is that is from their end. What about from our end?
Yes.
What is it that we are gaining? When you look at everything, you realize that every advantage to China is a disadvantage to us. And the problem is this: the leadership that we have, are they not seeing this? And when they are not seeing this, I mean, what is it that they are doing? You've talked about the issue of access to these particular agreements.
Yes.
I think it's high time now the citizenry becomes very strong. I want to see people going to court under the rights to access of information to make sure that these agreements are publicized. By the way, I wouldn't be surprised if we find that maybe they even drafted in Chinese, so even if they're given public, you'll not even be able to understand. But one thing I have to say is
but
that
is that true? No. Yeah, it was actually drafted in Mandarin. Most of it, I don't know.
Okay, those are rumors we hear that some of them are actually. You find that even simple things like dispute resolution, the mechanisms of choice, the seat shall be in China, it shall be conducted in Chinese language, Chinese law. So you find that even there's a dispute, it becomes really a challenge when it comes to that. So I think the issue is that if you are a leader and you are being put in a situation whereby you are supposed to be getting this particular loan, please have the interest of your country at heart.
Yes.
Please, it's just a request. Make sure that even if you are getting this cheap loan, let not everything be our disadvantage. Let us also be able to ensure that at least we have something that is to the advantage of the Kenyan people.
Ogasha?
Yes,
On
let me...
is it the Article 35 Access to Information Act? What article is it?
Yeah,
Article
it is
35.
35. Yeah.
35 there. Yeah.
No, three. I think I have on that issue. I have three main takeaways from this discussion.
Briefly, because you're winding up. Yes.
It is critical that we join and coordinate at the very top public finance decision making, at the work done at the Office of Parliamentary Budget, the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Yes.
Should be coordinated with work done at the very top in the Executive Office to form an Office of Management and Budget. And that is the work that gives the Executive the purview of the budget, where every ministry is accountable, not at the tail end, but with an actual real-time matrix of results and matrix of implementation, and matrix of performance, and matrix of spending, in order to arrest the leakages that we have in the budget. That is the first takeaway. Real coordination between the Parliamentary Budget Office and the creation of an Office of Management and Budget to really take control of budgets in the ministries and agencies of government. The second thing was mentioned from the beginning by the Speaker, Daktari, that you really need to change the structure of the economy, and that can be done within whatever pillar you choose. But you need to change the structure of the economy from consumption, especially, and from imports to domestic productive activity.
Thank you.
And
the third one, briefly, because I'm being pushed out of the studio by my director. Yes.
Finally, you need to coordinate policy mix between the time that you spend fiscal expenditures and the policy mix coming from the Central Bank of Kenya. Unless those two are worked and mixed together properly, you will always have distortions in the performance of the economy.
Right, thank you. Right. Rachel, your closing remarks briefly?
Yes. Okay. You know, I want to pick up from where they are. You know, Kenya's debt. China is the highest lender to Kenya. China is not part of the debt sustainability framework of the international community. You know that. Their currency is not convertible, so we don't know what their currency is.
The yuan.
Yes. You know, you can't convert that currency. And then one thing we must really know is that as much as we want to borrow, we are representatives of the citizens of Kenya. We cannot just go and decide, okay, those ones have more conditionalities. Would you rather borrow from somebody who is transparent, who is telling you this is what your loan will cost you, other than go to someone who will give you a contract which you don't know the fine print? I would rather, you know, the Kenyan government, who are the representatives of the Kenyan citizens borrowing on behalf of Kenyans, take serious responsibility to make sure that we understand what we are borrowing and how the repayments will be.
Thank you. Thank you. Good point to leave it at that.